Hey, my name is Patrick Clements, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of SherpaDesk. And today we're pretty excited. We have Erich Kron with us. He is a technology evangelist, a cybersecurity professional, works with Novi4, which is one of the largest security awareness platforms, education platforms in the world. And today what we want to do is we want to talk about IT security and IT protection for education. We know a lot of our customers deal with this. They're going back to school, and we wanted to pick the brain of really some thought leaders to try to really get them an understanding of what to look for and start training their not only IT professionals but anybody that's interacting with the network. Eric, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're passionate about.
Okay, yeah. So like you said, my name's Erich Kron. I work with Novi4. So our focus is on training end users and then doing simulated phishing attacks to help avoid that piece of it. We all know that phishing is kind of an issue here. My background, I've been in IT and security since back in the mid-1990s. Worked in the government, worked in public sector, private sector, all kinds of different types of organizations throughout the years. And one of the things for me personally I noticed going on quite a few years ago is that the human element keeps getting missed in security, which is why I'm where I am now, because I'm very passionate about trying to get the focus on that a little bit and hopefully to eliminate a lot of the problems that people are having, or at least reduce the number of issues that we're having due to the human element. So that's why I'm here.
Well, cool. That's actually going to jump into one of the first questions I have to talk to you about. So there's a trend in social engineering and hacking that's going on in a lot of networks today. And so the biggest challenges for school districts and IT security experts face is really educating their teachers and their technicians on how to reduce that social engineering hacking. Do you have any kind of thoughts or input on what we can talk to these people about?
Yeah, it's tough because schools are getting targeted quite a bit these days. We're seeing a lot of stuff with ransomware. We're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff happening, which is really unfortunate because, frankly, my mother-in-law was a first grade teacher for a long time. My father-in-law was in education. These are folks that pour their heart and soul in things, and now they're having to deal with all of this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ransomware hits them, and they lose all of their lesson plans and things like that. So it's kind of heartbreaking on that. When it comes to teaching them, though, what we need to understand as security professionals quite often is that we're dealing with people that are not technical, right? These are people that they're doing their job. And unfortunately, as technical-minded people, we tend to get really in the weeds on things that don't really matter. So I like to tell people when we're trying to train people, and this is in education, this is in the offices too, whether we're doing the marketing department or HR or whatever, we need to avoid the real technical explanations, and we need to make sure that we teach people to understand how it impacts them and how it relates to them. As much or more than all of the technical stuff behind it. That's something where unfortunately we tend to fall short on the security side.
Yeah, and we've been in the help desk and IT support business for almost 12 years now, and one of the things that it does kind of get lost on is we're not only dealing with new teachers that are coming in and training up on the system, but older individuals, even facility maintenance people that it's a very massaging type process, and so for us it's we're trying to also educate them how to use the platform, but also best policies and practices. So it's always a little bit difficult, and we're always looking for some tips and tricks to try to get those guys to okay, don't use these types of passwords, or don't use these types of security logins.
Yeah, it comes down to making it relatable to them.
Right.
It really does, and making them understand why. It's always great to be able to say, don't do this, but people don't listen unless they understand why, and oftentimes why it benefits them. Not just the organization, not just the school, not the ISD, but them personally.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So we need to tie that back to there.
Given the particular challenges that school IT departments face, what are vulnerabilities you see that they will face not only now but in the future?
Yeah, certainly the human side is going to be a part of it. It has been for a long time. I mean, let's face it, the scams, whether it's financial scams, whether it's using it to get into the systems, that's all definitely something that's going to be around for a while. We're not going to solve it. We haven't solved it in 20 years. What we need to do is try to reduce it as much as we can. But the technical attacks, those are also upping their game. And again, things like ransomware are just brutal. We also need to understand that the younger people, as they're in school and as they're progressing through the age, they have social security numbers that are, unused, that are very valuable to attackers. And there's a lot of valuable data. So you couple that with the lack of resources, financial and otherwise, and it's definitely going to be a challenge for people in the foreseeable future. And that's a shame. But I also think that one thing that we can do within the schools is help start some campaigns that help people understand that these scams and these things happen. We need to start even just trickle campaigns. It doesn't have to be all in your face once a year, but we need to start doing some of that. Some of that can be pretty low cost and can really help people deal with what's coming up. So as threats progress, as different kinds of scams happen, and that's what we see is we see these people changing how they're doing the attacks subtly sometimes. Sometimes there's brand new attacks. But we need to be able to keep the folks in the loop as to what's going on and what they're going to be facing as we move forward. Because let's face it, the attacks are not getting worse. They're getting more complicated. They're getting these people are gaining experience, and they're able to make them work much, much better. And this is both in technology and the human side. So I still think we're going to face those resource shortages, and we're going to have to come up with new, more clever ways to help offset what's going on and battle the problem. But a key thing to that is letting people know, technology or not, these are the things that you're facing, and that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I love it. Being more preventative on the front end versus reactive on the back end. And you're always trying to stay a step ahead of the game. Yeah, and whether that's through classes, through platforms, but always staying more preventative on security. You kind of alluded a little earlier about young people being introduced into these networks. And that's becoming a big initiative now. There's what's called the one-to-one initiative, which is most school districts are starting to issue, laptops, Chromebooks to students. So now you've not only just doubled, tripled, but sometimes 10 times the amount of nodes that are on your network. Can you speak a little bit about that on some of the concerns and things that school districts should be thinking about when they're starting to move to a one-to-one initiative with now you have students with not only laptops but also mobile phones on a network?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how that's all changed, right? In the industry, we had BYOD back in the day, which basically meant a phone. But now, what are they connecting to this? I mean, they're connecting all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Kids have all kinds of devices that are internet connected. I will say I love that a lot of schools are doing things with Chromebook type devices because those are a lot better than, say, Windows machines everywhere. Frankly, they're easier to manage, et cetera, et cetera. I think when it comes to planning and to setting these things up, a lot of care has to be taken to isolating your dirty network, if you will, the ones that have all of these other devices on there that are uncontrolled, or possibly uncontrolled. I mean, kids get a Chromebook, they can still plug in USB devices and their phones and stuff like that, or whatever. And keeping those separated from the real assets as much as possible, and monitoring the traffic that flows between them wherever possible is a key to that sort of thing, because the devices are going to happen. I'm waiting for kids to start bringing in mobile versions of the Alexa puck and trying to put them on their desks, right? And they're so used to this, and it's becoming a part of their lives and how they manage data and their lives and their calendars and all this stuff. We can't really fault them for wanting to use this technology, but we sure got to watch how they're connecting it to things and what those things they connect can reach out to within the protected parts of the network.
So one of the things I want to talk about is with the growth of IoT and spyware and ransomware starting to really become part of really everyday hardware and consumer products like cameras and monitors. What are some things that school districts need to think about when they start introducing these IoT type devices? Where are we seeing the biggest security breaches and fallacies?
Yeah, for me, it's segmentation. Keep them on their own network. It was several years ago now. I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. I believe it was a college campus that somebody got in and started hitting their IoT light bulbs, their smart light bulbs.
Wow.
They used that to launch basically a denial of service attack.
Wow.
Using light bulbs and vending machines that were on the same network or had the capability.
I've heard the vending machines, yeah.
Network. Yeah, and so we have to understand that, honestly, IoT devices are going to be insecure.
Right.
That's a fact of life. We're not getting firmware for light bulbs. We're not getting, firmware for vending machines and things like that. So we have to treat them as potentially hostile devices no matter what we do. And that means keeping them far away from the real network.
Sure.
And as we add these things, again, we know that the support's not going to be there. We have to plan for that.
So that gets us a little bit into some of the things that, especially some of our customers, not all districts are treated equal. We have some districts that are super advanced with like high IT teams and a lot of professionalism, but we also deal with a lot of school districts that are rural and don't quite have the same type of, access to budgets and professionals. So going into some of these maybe rural school districts, what would be some, if you're talking to an IT team or you're talking to, maybe it's a team of 2 or 3 professionals, what would be some good habits or some good techniques that you would, try to encourage them to initially implement into their environments?
So I think what happens is a lot of times we think that we have to apply technology to fix some things. And I think that that's unfortunate. It's in the industry everywhere, right? Because frankly, marketing teams work great jobs. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations, and this is in corporate America or it's in education, it's in all of these different places, we leave some of the foundational things out. And I would tell people to focus on some of the foundational things, right? Things like patching is key, and it's not very expensive to do patching, right? Mm-hmm. Patches are usually free, but it's one of these processes that can be cumbersome. It's not much fun, but it's so important. My colleague, Roger Grimes, wrote a book. It's called Data-Driven Defense, and I love the approach that he takes in this, which is basically look at what's causing you your problems and tackle that. Okay, a lot of companies, they go through checklists or something that someone else has put together that says you need to do this, you need to do that. But does that really apply to you? And if you already have limited resources, can you afford to put resources towards the things that aren't your threats? So in other words, if you're dealing with malware all the time, if that's your big headache, is computers are getting affected every week and you're having to run around and do that, does it make sense to deal with, a flash patch on a server, to spend your resources on that? No, it doesn't. So you need to look at what your individual issues are. Sure. And then try to focus on that, especially in the fundamentals, things like principle of least privilege. So where if one person doesn't need access to files or folders, they shouldn't have it. Right. It doesn't cost anything to apply that. It's already there. It takes time. But if you don't have budget, that's something that is absolutely vital to security.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Definitely segmentation of access is a great start. So I want to talk about some stuff that I think is super interesting on my end. We've written a couple of blogs about it. We've talked to a couple of ethical hackers, but I want to get some of your perspective or insight on ethical hackers. Are they the good guys? Should we use them? Should we hire them? That we're always getting requests from people that looking for can we do an ethical hack on you guys to test your security vulnerabilities? Would you guys pay for it? We have a great internal IT team, but do you have any kind of thoughts or feedback on these cowboy ethical hackers that want to bang on these networks?
Yeah, I personally love the ethical hacking community. I'm at a hacker conference right now, actually, one of the bigger ones. And these people are just as passionate about security as other people. And frankly, what happens far too often is, if I program and then I turn around and test the program and I go, oh, it's the guy who wrote, that's not necessarily the best approach, right? And so having more eyes on it it's a huge advantage. Now, what I like to see is I like to see things done with the bug bounty type scope, right?
Sure.
And using places like HackerOne, which has some things in place to make sure that folks are vetted, that are doing the ethical hacking for you. There's some legal things that you need to take into account when it comes to that. Like, if you hire somebody who just reached out to you and says, yeah, go ahead and ethical hack me, and they do that and they exfiltrate a lot of data, even if it's just to show you that they did it, you potentially have a breach on your hands.
Sure.
And you got to look at the legal ramifications of that. So I recommend using services that do things like that. Like I said, HackerOne is one that we use.
Okay.
And I've used in other places. Those things are very good. You put up a bug bounty or something like that and say, okay, and you can define the scope. So that's important too. Just don't forget to not. Some people are tempted to not include the things that they know are going to fail. Which is probably the wrong idea, right?
For sure.
You want to make sure that that's going on. But I love the ethical hacker scene. And again, I see these people, these are hardworking people that have a passion for finding these things before the bad guys do and before they can exploit them and cause the problems that they do.
We're not, we don't know all the things, right? So it's always good to extend what your network is and see if you get some other eyeballs that are actually on your network. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then we always see black hat, right? And do you ever see? Is there ever a time where black hat techniques are needed to protect your business?
So the techniques, the way that's worded is a little bit different because white hat guys, they do it with the techniques that the black hat folks are using.
Okay.
They use the same hacking techniques. They use that.
Even the social engineering and the social hacking, being able to talk to your employees and maybe try to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all those techniques are on the table. Now, the difference between white hat and black hat is what the intent is.
Sure.
Really. And there are some shady things that you could do, on the black hat side that I don't recommend that, white hat hackers do. You have to be very careful with that sort of stuff. You don't want to threaten people with bodily harm and stuff like that.
Right.
If you're doing a social engineering event and you're trying to social engineer, you don't want to be the one that's going, hey, I've got your kids, and so let me right?
Yeah.
And that would be a black hat technique, if you will.
Right.
But you can kind of see the difference there. I hope that illustrates the point.
No, that's it. It's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. I mean, you got to keep some level of ethics and morality in play when you're doing these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that needs to be spelled out in the scope. Honestly, it really does.
Sure.
You need to come to that agreement before you have somebody going in and doing that. Most of the guys that I know that do this for a living, they already know where the lines are drawn.
Okay.
But organizationally, you also need to understand where you're comfortable having them take it on that side,
Sure.
so that there isn't a disagreement later that they're going, well, this is pretty normal, and you're going, well, I never thought about that.
Well, that's pretty much most of what I want to talk to you today. It was amazing getting your feedback. I think our customers are going to love it. I think our market's going to love it. I would love to give you the final word as far as what you would like to leave us with as talking to IT professionals and just IT teams in general.
Honestly, and I mean this sincerely, keep up the good fight. It's well appreciated. I've spent a lot of time in the trenches myself, and I know we don't get pats on the back all that often.
That's right.
And so thank you for what you're doing. I mean that most sincerely. Don't forget that there are great communities out there and there's support out there to help you with these things. Take advantage of resources, conferences, especially the free ones, things like B-sides and stuff like that, where you can learn for nothing or next to nothing. Those are just fantastic.
And again, I can't really thank you enough for taking the time to do this.
Oh, no, I appreciate you having me. Like this.
Cool.
Thank you very much.